Today we're talking about raising kids with livestock, the skills and life lessons they'll learn, and how it will benefit them for the rest of their life. I'll be sharing tips on age-appropriate work, motivating kids to do their chores, teaching them to be self-motivated, and how to strengthen your relationship with your kids while working alongside them. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Before we get started on today's topic, I want to read a review titled, Love It. Jeanette Hayes writes, "This podcast is for anyone who wants to learn about livestock for food. I also suffered from feeling sick due to diet. Such a great podcast. Thank you." Thanks, Jeanette. If you'd like to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, scroll down to Ratings and Reviews, click on the purple words, Write a Review, then give me stars and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from you, and you might just hear me share your review on the podcast. I saw this quote a few years ago, and it stuck with me. We have livestock to raise kids, not kids to raise livestock. So many of you have told me that one of your primary motivations for wanting to raise animals and live a simpler life is your kids. So I want to dive a little deeper into that today, specifically around raising livestock. If you want to teach your kids vintage values, this is for you. Caring for livestock can teach several things. First, work ethic. Having daily chores that are physically demanding and challenge a child to stretch their abilities. Teach a kid to keep working until the job is done. When Sage was little, we got chickens. I've talked about this before. We got the chickens so that she could learn to raise an animal and take care of it, but also so that she could sell the eggs and learn how money works. So she was pretty small, 7 years old, and the chores were not too hard for her, but she had to do some problem solving to figure it out. The water bucket, when it was full, was way too heavy, so she had to figure out how to get the water in the waterer without trying to pack an entire bucket of water. And she did figure it out. Same process for the feed. A full bucket of feed was just too much for her little self to pack. Problem solving is such an important skill to learn. So we let the kids struggle a little bit, not to the point of frustration where they want to quit, but enough that they actually think about new ways to do things so that they can figure it out by themselves. Another benefit is the child is actually responsible for another living thing outside of themselves. This is counterculture to our self-centered society. It feels like nowadays kids are taught that the only thing that matters is themselves, and so caring for something else and being required to put their needs above themselves is so important. The chores have to be done, even when it's hot or cold outside and you really would prefer not to go out, or when you're tired, the animals still need fed and watered. Kids learn to do the important and sometimes hard things before playtime. Around here, we feed the animals before we eat breakfast. When you raise kids with animals, they're going to learn a lot of lessons about life and death. The reality is that animals die. Sometimes I think we have put death in a special little compartment. In a way, we've tried to insulate ourselves from it, and we hope death never touches us. But it will. Kids that are raised around animals see life and they see death. At some point, they will hold a baby goat or other animal as the life leaves its body. As hard as it is, it's an experience that helps them gain a true understanding of death and, more importantly, life. Kids that are raised with animals have a deeper knowledge of the value of life. They're going to understand where their food comes from. I often get asked how we are able to eat the animals we raise. And to be honest, sometimes it's hard. And that's okay. It's really about gratitude. I'm grateful for the animal that lived a beautiful life to ultimately nourish my family. We are so removed from our food that we think all food comes beautifully packaged in the grocery store, and we don't give a second thought about where it came from, or what it was before it was on a styrofoam tray in the grocery store meat counter. I remember the first time we raised turkeys, and I offered to provide a turkey for the family Thanksgiving dinner. I had a relative that pulled back in shock and said, "How can you eat the turkeys you raised?" I knew they were indeed having turkey for Thanksgiving, so I was a little baffled, but asked, "You do know that the turkeys in the grocery store were once alive too, right?" The difference is that I know my turkeys have had a pretty great life. They're healthy, and they're going to have a painless end, and then fulfill their purpose. They didn't eat one of our turkeys that year, but we did, and it was wonderful. Kids that are raised in this lifestyle of growing animals for food are so much more connected to their food and reality. It's like going back in time to a day when everyone lived this way. When my youngest was about 5 years old, she had the opportunity to show the alternate pig that my oldest daughter had for 4-H. She loved that pig. She practiced. She was so ready for the show. And she did great. The show was over, and then, of course, that was the pig that we butchered for ourselves. She named it Oreo. It was so cute. Well, one morning, a couple months later, we were at the breakfast table, and we were eating bacon, and she looked at me and she said, "Mom, is this Oreo?" And I said, "Yes, honey, it is." And she said, "Oh, I promised her I wouldn't eat her, but she just tastes so good." I know to some people that might sound a little morbid, but that is reality. If we're eating bacon, it was once a pig. And the kids that are raised doing that, it's normal for them. When the kids grow up, they will have skills in raising food if they choose to do that. Once they have these skills and knowledge, they'll be able to raise animals for their own families when they're older. Based on the way the world is looking, I definitely want my kids to understand how to raise and grow their own food and know that it doesn't just magically appear in the grocery store. There's something I want to talk about for just a minute because I think this is important. Special needs kids and their relationship with animals. I have a son that's autistic. From a very young age, I knew that something just wasn't sitting quite right. When he was 3 years old, we went through all the testing and he was diagnosed with autism and several other issues. Of course, I was homeschooling my older daughter. I didn't really know what to do, and I was reaching out for help. I'm very fortunate to have had Temple Grandin as a professor of mine at Colorado State University, and I reached out to her, and she said, "Do you have him riding a horse? Is he around animals?" And she said, "Do it more." The other thing she told me to do was to hold him to the same standard as my girls. And right then, everything changed. We weren't treating him or teaching him according to his diagnosis. We were parenting him for what we wanted him to become. And that changed everything. Animals are so therapeutic for all of us. I don't know the science behind it, but I've watched my own son, as well as other kids, connect with animals in a way that they can't connect with people. And once they learn to make that connection with the animals, eventually they transfer that skill into connecting with people. Not only special needs, but all kids benefit from the connection with animals. Being involved in 4-H for decades, I've seen insecurity blossom into confidence, shyness transform into bold, articulate speech, and troubled teens gain a respect for life they didn't have before, all through their livestock projects. So, practically, how do you do this? First of all, start with age-appropriate chores. Don't give the little tiny kids things that they cannot physically do. Let them work hard, and even struggle a little, but don't let them work to the point of frustration and quitting. Cheer them on. Give them lots of praise for their effort. That's the best motivation you can possibly give. They'll end up with so much confidence in their ability to do hard things. What does it look like at our place? When they're small, we start with gathering eggs, chicken feed and water with help, and little chores like bottle feeding the goats. As they get older and stronger, we add in things like watering and feeding the goats by themselves. They can help with that when they're littler. They learn to milk, bottle feed calves, and actually start raising their own animals to sell products or actually to sell the animals. And then by the time they're teenagers, they're stacking hay in feed sacks, raising their own animals, and making more decisions about the raising of their own animals. We also have them moving electric fence and hauling water, things like that. Here are a few tips to help things go smoothly as you start introducing your kids to chores. First, be patient. Know that chores are going to take longer than if you were doing them yourself. Milk will be spilled, eggs will be broken, but it's a small price to pay for the lessons your kids are learning. Show them what to do. Physically do the job and show them exactly what to do. Then watch them do it and help them if they're not quite getting it right. Explain why things are important. For example, if you have a child that is responsible for watering the goats, explain to them why clean water is so important and why having water in front of them all the time is so important. Make the expectations very clear. Back to the water example, the expectation is that the animals will always have clean water in front of them. Once the kids know the expectations, it's much easier for them to actually do the chores in the way you want them done. Have a fun attitude about chores. Almost make it a game, especially when they're little. Now here's one I struggle with. Don't take advantage of the willing worker. This is so hard. The child that will jump up and do anything you ask at any moment is easy to take advantage of. I have to remind myself that I need to respect their time if I expect them to respect mine. Notice their efforts and contribution to the family and the homestead and the farm. Say things like, I appreciate how you did this thing so well. I noticed you closed the gate and latched it. Thank you for doing that. Things like that are really motivating to the kids. You will encounter the chore slacker. Here's my favorite strategy for handling kids that don't do their chores. First, don't argue or nag. That gets you nowhere. After some gentle reminding, go ahead and do the chores for them and then send them a bill at the end of the week. And actually require them to pay the bill. The reason I do it this way is because I'm not going to let the animals suffer because I have a kid that's learning about doing chores and not quite got it down yet. The life lesson here is, if you don't do your work, you have to pay someone else to do it. I always give them an option to earn their money back by doing some of my chores after their chores are done. Life lesson, you get paid when you work. Work alongside your kids regularly, even when they're older. The best talks ever about all the things in life happen when we're working. Sometimes it's just fun conversation, and sometimes it's big and real. For some reason, it's easier to bring up the heavy topics of life when you're not looking them in the eyes, but rather working side by side. And for those of you that are in the dreaming phase of homesteading and livestock ownership, you can use most of these strategies in your home and yard while you're working toward having your own patch of land. Work with your kids. Give them chores and responsibilities. Recognize their efforts and contribution to your home. My kids are a little older now, 18, 16, and 12, and one of my greatest joys is watching them work together to achieve a common goal. It is by no means perfect, and I would never expect it to be, but I'm thrilled when I see a brother and sister that were arguing earlier help each other on a project and then compliment each other on their willingness to help. Raising kids is hard work. But I think that using livestock and chores as a tool to teach vital life skills will give your future adults a huge advantage in the real world. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.